Welcome back to the Marketing Answers podcast. I'm Jamie Coast, a former marketing strategist who picked up a paintbrush and built a successful wedding stationery business. Now I'm helping you grow your creative business by answering your marketing questions. We're talking sales, not vibes, strategy, not manifestation. Each week, I'll be picking real questions from real creative businesses to answer with practical advice to move your business forward. So let's get started. Our first question today comes from Riley C. She writes, I've been a full-time graphic designer for almost 10 years and have fallen in love with the art of stationery. I've been wanting to make a career out of event branding and stationery for a few years now. I have set up a business and started taking on a few projects here and there, but I'm wanting to potentially make the switch to full-time. So what are some helpful tips in making that career switch? I'd love some advice on what has been the best marketing for you in getting consistent stream of clients. Where is the best place to send a majority of your energy starting out? Thank you. I know this is a very common question for a lot of first-time business owners or business owners just starting out, even business owners who've been in the business for a little while. I see this all the time in all of the industry groups that I'm in. The question is always, where are you finding clients? Where's the best platform? What's the, number one platform I can use? What's the one that actually works, right? And the truth is that there isn't one single marketing platform that is the silver bullet, right? That's going to help you get clients. The idea that there's a marketing tactic or a specific channel that's just better and that's going to be the key to unlock your growth, and you just need to cycle through all sorts of different strategies until you find it, is just not true. And I see this mistake so often. I have even in certain times during my business thought this, Pinterest isn't working, so maybe I'll try Instagram, or, Instagram isn't getting me the clients I need, maybe I'll just focus more on Etsy, right? Or bridal shows. Another person says to reach out to planners, and networking is the key. And so then you just end up kind of everywhere all at once and not really doing a great job on any one platform, but you're doing a mediocre job on a bunch of other platforms. And the reason why you see this, one person saying that bridal shows work, another person saying that Pinterest works, another person saying that Instagram works, is because they're telling the truth. All of them work, right? If you really focus in on one, and learn how to use the platform and learn the right messaging and learn how to make it convert for you, it's going to work, right? And so if you're stuck in this sort of endless loop of taking courses, following different people for advice, I want to just free you from the idea that you're going to find one specific platform that's going to work. And if you just keep trying new ones, that's not true. You just need to pick one and stick with it, right? Every single marketing channel is going to convert if you are doing it well, and you're not trying to do all of them at the same time and not giving any of them enough time to work. So what you need to do is start with one marketing channel, one that you think you can keep up with and master, and don't move on from that channel until you are getting consistently 6 figures from that channel, maybe even 7 figures. Really stick with that one channel until you're getting $10,000 a month. So let's talk about a few examples. So here are 15 different ways that you could market your business as a creative in weddings, specifically, but a lot of these will apply to creative disciplines like interior designer or graphic designer as well. One is Pinterest. You can focus on blogging and CEO as a second one. You can do wedding shows and in-person events. Instagram, TikTok, reaching out to planners and venues to be a referral partner. You could sell on marketplaces like Etsy or Amazon and leverage their audiences. You could sell direct to retailers and wholesale in a lot of these categories. You can focus just on Facebook and Facebook groups. I actually know a day of coordinator who her entire marketing strategy, it's just Facebook groups. And it's really easy for her. She basically just does Facebook groups. Every single day she goes into Facebook groups. Anyone who says, I'm looking for a day of coordinator, she responds, hey, we have your date available, and, answers them. And that's how she gets the majority of her clients, is just through Facebook groups. So that's an example of how you could just use Facebook. Podcasting is another one. You could just go on a bunch of podcasts, right? You could create your own podcast. YouTube, PR in general, You could do magazine and print ads. I know that's a little bit of an old school one, but you could really just focus your entire strategy on magazine and print and be in every single local magazine in your market, be interviewed, create content for them. You could be a columnist, right? You can do ads, and you can just really corner that market, right? Anytime anybody looks in a, print publication in your area, they're going to see you and they're going to see your business. Television is another one that feels a little bit old school, but since I have some experience in television marketing, I want to say it's still alive and well. And television doesn't necessarily just mean linear television, cable networks, broadcasting networks. It could also mean streaming, or CTV, which is like the connected television that they have, or different television units like at gas stations and things like that. Local news, right? You could just focus your entire strategy on television and be interviewed all the time on local news. And that, would be really, really successful if you did it strategically and you did it the right way. So what you really need to do is just pick one. Pick one that you think your audience is on the most and engage with you the most, but also what would be the most enjoyable to you, based on your branding, your products, your price point, your skill set. So let's talk through some examples. If your business is totally new, you can shape a lot of these decisions pretty easily right now. But let's say you wanted to work with really high-end luxury and celebrity couples. So, looking at that list we had before, maybe Instagram and Facebook are worth pursuing. But when I'm thinking about luxury clients, I would assume that most of them are hiring a wedding planner. And so they're not necessarily like browsing Instagram and browsing Facebook for who's going to be their photographer or who's going to be their stationery designer, right? They've already hired a planner, they're working with a planner, and they're going to go to their planner for recommendations. So the planner is going to select from her personal roster, 2 to 3 vendors that she thinks are the right fit for the client in each category to recommend. So your strategy that might make sense would be really honing in on developing those planner relationships and getting in with a couple of planners that can be your main source of referrals. So you're going to need to build relationships with them and develop a strategy in order to do that. So here's the strategy that I would recommend as an example. You could research and create a list of planners to reach out to. You're probably going to need hundreds of names. Follow them all on social media. Maybe create a targeted list to start and then broaden it. You're going to want to email them what your specific benefit is. I would create an offer specifically for planners in order to get them to create sample work with you. Provide them with something that's valuable to their clients. What you don't want to do is just reach out to a planner and say, hey, can you refer me? It comes across very cold, very spammy. They, have people doing that to them all day long. So that's really not the strategy you want to go with. What you want to do is offer them something of value. It doesn't need to be expensive, but it could be, hey, can I create your personal stationery so that you can see my work? Or one of the things that I did that was really successful was I reached out to them with a stationery timeline checklist that they could use for their couples. So I actually, provided them with a free resource, and I had a whole website that had, 15 different resources that they could download, a checklist for what their day of items should be. That was, more of a master checklist right now, just like a basic one of, what you need, but things that you might love to have, because I know that, more luxury clients and more high-end clients are not necessarily just doing the basics. They want creative ideas. The other thing you need to do is go to the same events they're going to, right? So you need a conference budget, you need a networking budget, you need to be joining all of the networking groups in your area and, going to the same events that they're going to so you can meet them face to face and develop a personal relationship there. You could consider sending them direct mail. You have their addresses, you can send them, a Christmas card, a holiday card. You could be sending them, different updates throughout the year. Maybe you send them quarterly, right? Or maybe you send them some sort of offer quarterly, whether that's for their clients or for them. The other thing you could do is nurture relationships with by sending them gifts at the end of the year. I usually did like an end of the season gift with thank you notes. And as you can see, there's a ton of different tactics within this strategy. that you need to be doing just to focus on one of these, different marketing platforms. So this really could be like a part-time job, just honing in on planners if you really wanted to do it well. It doesn't mean just emailing a bunch of planners one time and then never following up, never interacting with them in any sort of capacity. That's what most people do when they think of their marketing plan. They say, okay, planners is one, Pinterest is one, Instagram is one. And then they end up just only doing like a tiny little bit in each area instead of just saying, no, planners is going to be my marketing strategy and I'm just going to go after planners 15 different ways. That's the way that you need to think about it. If Pinterest was your example, then, you need to think about like all of the different things you can do on Pinterest, not just create some boards one time. Or create some boards monthly, right? You need to be thinking about, well, could I get on other people's boards? Could I, what kind of content do I need to create? Should I be doing Pinterest ads, right? You can go really, really deep in there. Going back to my planner example, now, when we talked about, what's right for your clients, we also need to talk about what's right for you as a business owner and your personality. If you hate sales and you hate going to events and you hate talking to people, this is definitely not the strategy for you. You definitely don't want to, reach out to planners and develop an entire strategy that you would hate, right? Because this strategy is really going to require you to reach out and schmooze with planners constantly, right? You're going to need to be sending dozens of emails a week. You're going to be needing to go out to events several times a month. You might need to travel for conferences. You need to remember their birthdays or favorite coffee orders so that you can nurture these relationships. So this is not a strategy for you if you're an introvert whose worst nightmare is being a salesperson, right? We don't want to pick that strategy. So really think through what you pick, what's right for your target audiences, and how you can realistically show up. So let's circle back to that question, make sure we've answered it in full and you have really clear next steps. Think about what your business is, who you want to attract, where those people are hanging out, and then how you can best show up in those areas. What I would also do is some competitive research. See what other stationery companies are doing that are in your space, right, that are comparable to you. What platforms are they on? How often are they showing up? How can you differentiate yourself from them, right? And don't be discouraged by competition. That's a really, really good sign. If other people are doing it, then that means that you've picked something that works because other people are doing it. So, one of the things you might want to do is, look at another local successful stationery company in the United States or in the world that you want to emulate, that you feel like you're targeting very similar customers. What are they doing, right? If they're on Instagram, then maybe you should be on Instagram. If they are not really posting that much and you can't really find out what they're doing like online, then they're not doing it online, right? They're doing something else. Like they're probably networking with planners and doing things that way. And you also want to make sure that you're picking someone who's actually successful. There's a lot of people who, have businesses, they do amazing creative work, but they're not paying themselves a real salary. So that's another thing to keep in mind when you're looking at competitors is just, focus on competitors who are actually doing the kind of business that you want to be doing. Like I look at Minted, for example, a lot. So I know they're advertising on Facebook, right? They're doing Google ads. So I know like they're doing email marketing. Like those are the things that I know they're doing as a much, much larger business than mine. And so those are the areas that I know I need to move into if I want to expand my business, right? You can't run a 7-figure e-commerce business without paid advertising. That's just, very rarely would you see a 7-figure, 8-figure business not doing paid advertising. So that is something that I needed to think about when I was moving my business strategically forward is how can I set it up to get, lots of leads in, and be able to accomplish all of those, be able to fulfill all of those. And then, from there, what are the things I need to change about my business? And then what are the marketing pieces that I need to put in from there? All right. Question number 2 comes from Lindsay G. She asks, what's your canned response for everyone will just throw the invitation away? I love this question. It really gives us a chance to talk about overcoming client objections generally. So no matter what you sell, whether it's photography, planning, interior design, invitations, it's essential that you identify and overcome what the most common objections are to buying your product or service. Some of these will be the same for everyone in the category. Others are going to be specific to your product, your branding, or your price points. So when you identify the core objections to buying your product and making it a focus of your messaging on social media or email, when you talk to clients, discovery calls, it can become a really powerful tool in order to better sell your product and market your product to potential buyers. So this is an example of a very common objection with invitations, which is, why should I spend a ton of money on them? They're just going to get thrown out. It's a common concern. It's a common objection. That people are going to have this objection when they're buying invitations, any sort of physical invitations at any price point. They might also have this same objection to buying flowers, right? They wilt, or the cake, right? You eat it and then it's gone. Everything pretty much about a wedding is thrown away when it's over. So you can broadly apply this to almost anyone in the industry that produces a good that's tangible, or just service that's going to be consumed on the day of, or on the day before and the days leading up, and not really used afterwards. So how you combat this question is something that's really useful. I like to focus on talking about this question before you even talk to the consumers, right? By getting in front of it and putting strategic content in, whether it's email or your Instagram posts, wherever you market your business, actually answering these questions right up front. You can do it in creative ways, you can do it in subtle ways, but I like to create a lot of social media content that is about this. So I recommend you do that. I also recommend that you bring this up in your discovery calls. If you're having client calls with customers beforehand, right? Bring it up when you talk about your process, or bring it up when you talk about, the value of the stationery, or the value of photography, or whatever it is. Bring that up in the discovery call, because you already know it's in the back of their minds. You might as well get in front of it and answer it for them. The other place that I like to answer this is in the proposal I send them. So during the proposal, I have a ton of different section headers where I actually, start seeding out this idea that there's pieces of the invitation that are permanent. And there's pieces of the invitation that are really special. So my custom proposals, address this concern and talk about the aspects of the invitation that are permanent throughout. So one of the examples is I have like a headline that's just like in between the different sections of my proposal. I have a headline that says something like, is it going to be cookie cutter or unforgettable, right? So that is sort of priming their mind of, am I going to buy cookie cutter invitations that everyone's going to forget about right away? Or am I going to create something so unforgettable, so memorable? And that's, a need of customers that they have, is they want their weddings to be memorable and different and unique to them. So I'm reminding them of that right in the proposal when they're considering me for a sale. The other thing I have in there is something I borrowed from Elizabeth Young from Biz Birthday Bash. She had a podcast with Cami Monet, another stationer. And so she said in one of her pieces of content, and I thought this was so great, was the only difference between a party and an empty room is the invitation. Right. So that's another line that I have in my proposal, right, to remind people of the importance of the invitation. That's what gets people to show up. That's what creates a party instead of just empty room. My social media content and marketing content does this also. So my audience is already very, very primed to have these objections answered before they even talk to me or buy something from me. And there are two main ways to really overcome this objection thoroughly. One is to talk about how it really does apply to everything in the wedding, in your wedding, in your event, right? Nothing about the wedding day is permanent. It's not going to last forever. The food's going to get eaten. The flowers are going to wilt, right? The cake's gone. Even your dress is gone. You're going to wear it one time. So, nothing about a wedding is meant to last forever. The marriage is what is meant to last forever. And that's what makes it so special. It's a once in a lifetime event. The marriage is the thing that lasts. So you can see how you create social media reels or carousels, right? That sort of reinforce this message of, nothing about the wedding is permanent. The marriage is what's permanent. So that's, the first way. If you really love stationery and if you really love artwork, because this is such an ephemeral, this is the one small moment in time, it needs to be really special, and it's your only excuse to pull out all the stops, right? So I talk a lot specifically, if you love stationery, if you love art, if you want to get the experience of doing a mailback RSVP card, right? If you want that experience of opening it, if you want to do a wax seal, if you've always just loved wax seals, this is the only time. This is the only moment that you're going to want to do this. You're not going to want to do it for a baby shower or a birthday later on, right? That's just it's not the same thing. So this is really your only chance to pull out all the stops, to do all the things you ever wanted to do. Because if you don't, you might regret it later. And you might not have another chance later. One of the stories I talk about all the time is what I regret most from my wedding, right? So that's a great angle, is if you've gotten married yourself, talk about your personal story, what you regret the most. And so one of the things I regret is not hiring a videographer. And so I talk about that in, personal stories and emails, or in social media content, is how I, really regret not hiring a videographer. It was an expense at the time that I just thought was too much. I didn't want to spend several $1,000s on a videographer when I was spending that on photography. So I skipped it. And now looking back, I really wish that I had spent that money, because I would have loved to have video of my sister's maid of honor speech. It was very funny. She does stand-up comedy on the side. And so, having a video of that would have been really awesome. And I don't have any video of it at all. My dad also passed away 2 years after I got married. And so, having footage of my dad that was more recent, that's not from when I was a kid, would have also, meant a lot to me now. And I just don't have that. So, personal stories like that are very powerful. You can transition them into, hey, I regretted not doing this thing. Make sure you don't regret not doing whatever it is you love or are thinking about, right? There's a lot of people who are on the fence of oh, I would really love this. I don't know if it's worth spending the price on it, right? And so by giving them messaging of I really regretted this thing, don't make the same mistake I did and don't regret it yourself, you're helping them overcome that hurdle. And so, that is another way that you can do that. The second way is thinking about what pieces of your experience or of your product are actually permanent. The objection to stationery that it's just thrown away is actually not true. There are pieces of it that are permanent. So one of the things that I like to emphasize on the discovery call and leading up is what my packages include that are permanent. So one of the things that I include with my packages is custom artwork. So all of my invitations, they pretty much have a custom painting in them, an original work of art, and I do all of that by hand. And so there is this original at the end. And so I tell them during this discovery call, when I talk about my process and walking through my process, one of the key script points that I always make is how I'm going to send you the originals afterwards. So I'm hand painting it, I'm hand sketching it, and then afterwards I'm scanning it in, and then from there I'm going to take the original artwork and send it to you. I'm going to mail it to you so that you can frame it or you can tuck it inside a wedding album. It's just a really nice keepsake, and it adds a level of permanence to the entire process. So that's a perfect example of, what about it is permanent. And I can talk about how you're really just commissioning your first artwork as a couple, and the invitations are just a bonus. By framing it this way, I'm doing two really important things. One is, I'm adding that level of permanence. I'm talking about that right off the bat, before they've even raised the question. It's in the back of their mind somewhere. But also I'm doing something called price anchoring, which is when you think about if you commissioned a custom piece of artwork for your home, right? If you had an oil painting done, or you had something done for yourself for a gift or for your home decor. Think about how much that costs, right? Just the painting itself is going to cost several $1,000s if you wanted a custom piece of artwork for your home. And that is something that people at, my customer's price point are going to consider when they're buying their first homes and decorating their first homes. They might be hiring an interior designer. They might be commissioning work of art for their entryway or, their hallway or their living room, things like that. So I'm already setting in their minds that, hey, you're commissioning custom artwork. That's like the first thing that you're doing. And the invitations are just, a bonus to that. And so then when I do get into the fact that, the price point is several $1,000s, they're already primed that like, well, just the artwork alone is worth several $1,000s, right? Because they're commissioning custom artwork. So that's, a clever way that you can sort of talk about that and, position the pieces that are going to be thrown away as just sort of like the side thing, the bonus thing. So it doesn't really matter so much that the invitation piece is temporary. It's really the artwork that's lasting, and it's the impression that it's giving to the guests. So that's one of my favorite ways to overcome this objection personally. I talk about it a lot in social media posts. I reiterate it in my proposal with different angles and different language. And then, I talk about it on the discovery call as well. So you should try and do this with every single objection that you can think of. It's really useful to just make a list of what all the possible objections could be to hiring you and to even just buying your product or service. Things like, oh, it's going to take up way too much of my time to work with the designer, or it's going to take too long to arrive, right? I only have a couple weeks, but I could just order something on Minted, for example, or I could just order something on Zazzle. That's going to be much faster. What if I don't like what they've designed? That's another one that's like very common. If you're not an artist, you're not a designer, you can't envision it. And so you're a little bit concerned, like, what if I spend all this money and then I don't like it? Right. So that's something you can talk about by sharing your process and sharing, what's customizable about it, what is changeable about it, right? How collaborative you are with feedback, maybe share examples of customers you've worked with who, had a specific vision and you interpreted it, or, you ran into, a little bit of a snag during the design process, but then you fixed it. So that's another one. Another one is like, will I be able to use the art for other things? So depending on what your licensing model is, will I be able to use the crest that you created for me on other things? So you can highlight that. So this is, how you should be thinking about all of your content. List out all of the objections that people might possibly have, create content around it so that you're answering as many of these objections as possible before they ever talk to you, before they ever buy, right? When they're in that sort of initial awareness and consideration stage, you're already answering all of their objections or possible objections. And then think about how you can bring them up on calls as a problem that's already solved. So they're at ease and they're ready to buy. And this is a nice segue into our question 3, which comes from Sally G. And she asks, couples don't really need my product and service. How do I market to couples when it's not something that they really need? And the way that this ties into our previous discussion is another common thing that I know a lot of business owners really struggle with, this idea of needs-based marketing, that like customers, how do they need your product? Needs-based messaging. When you're learning marketing 101 from courses and coaches and videos and things like that, they talk about listing out all the reasons why people need your product and really leaning into those needs. So I find that creative business owners especially really struggle with this idea because when it's creative or it's design oriented, you think, well, the customer doesn't really need it. It's something that they want, or it's something that's a nice to have. And so it's really confusing to a lot of business owners to think about, well, like, why does somebody actually need interior design? Or why does somebody actually need a wedding planner? And why does somebody actually need a designer to work with them on invitations? They can go do it themselves, right? Or they can go watch a YouTube video and learn how to do it. They don't actually need me, or they don't need this thing. They could skip it entirely, right? You can skip having a wedding planner. You could skip having, like lots of different creative services. And so how I like to change this is the idea of needs-based marketing is not about just physical needs and just essential needs. There's actually a framework for this. If you've taken a marketing course at the collegiate or like university level, one of the things they teach you in consumer psychology is something called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So I'm not going to go into every single one of those things, but essentially what Maslow's hierarchy of needs does is it really helps frame this idea of business owners and understand that, it's not just basic needs. It's not just, hey, I need food, I need clothing, I need shelter, right? All of those, are kind of at the base tier of what you need to survive, but there's other needs that humans have above that in the hierarchy. In addition to shelter and clothing and food and water, right? We have emotional needs as humans. So the theory is that once you've satisfied these more basic needs that you need to survive, then you're unlocking more complicated emotional needs beyond that. And there's some debate on that as to the order that they should be in, or the fact that, no, you can have emotional needs and basic needs at the same time. So we don't need to get into that. Just for the purpose of this marketing exercise, what we're talking about is just know that there are emotional needs, things like self-actualization, things like belonging, things like self-esteem, that those are the needs you need to be focusing on, right? Not just like the very practical needs of your creative service, but actually some of those more emotional, intellectual, social needs. So this is very common in luxury marketing in particular. Luxury products are not something that anybody needs. They're only something that people want. But we can think about what are the social, emotional needs that this is actually hitting on. One of them is belonging. You're belonging to a specific social class, you're belonging to a tribe, right? And what are the signals that you belong? So that's a very common one when you think about luxury goods, right? Like owning a Chanel bag means you belong to a certain community. Owning a Hermes bag means you belong to a certain community. Hiring an interior designer means you belong to a certain community, right? So something like talking about belonging, talking about fitting in with your friends, talking about what your friends are going to think of the result, things like that, what your family's going to think of the result. Those are all ways to sort of talk about your product in a way that's not just about, hey, you need this because if you don't get it, you're going to mess something up, or you're going to, have a bad wedding. Like that's not as effective as talking about, hey, this is what lets you, belong in your tribe, or this is what lets you, self-actualize and have that creative outlet that you want around your wedding, or, create something that's not cookie cutter, create something that's personal to you, where that's all about self-actualization. So that's, an easy one, an easy way to like really talk about this and fulfill it. One of the ways that I talk about this in my business is, a lot of my clients, say that designing their invitations was their favorite part of the entire wedding process. So I tap into that. I share testimonials that have that. I talk about how my clients have said that and how it satisfies that need for creativity and their need for self-actualization. So you can talk about how things are fun, right? How you can help personalize their wedding and can help them, sort of meet those self-actualization needs. And that concludes our episode. So don't forget, if you would like your marketing questions answered, head over to marketinganswerspodcast.com/ask. I'll put it in the show notes and have a chance to have your question answered on the show. In my next episode, I'm going to be talking all about Instagram and how to develop a content strategy that doesn't just help you go viral, but actually converts viewers into buyers. So if you are advertising on Instagram or thinking about using Instagram for your business, you don't want to miss that one. I'm going to talk about the real strategies today that work for creative businesses.